Okay, now I think we're live right now. So welcome to this special edition of Tech Talks. So it's the Spring Conference 2020 virtual edition. So for this week, Al, I know you have a really special guest that's going to be really popular with our audience here. We had a lot of questions about what she's working on in the last few months in several shows. So I'll just let you go on that.
Thank you, Steph. Well, our guest today on Tech Talks is Kimberly Curran of Natural Resources Canada, Equipment Division. And this is the group that is looking to implement the fenestration market roadmap in Canada. I'd just like to introduce Kimberly to our viewers. Kimberly Curran holds the position of Chief of Standards Development in NRCan's Office of Energy Efficiency. Previous to joining this group about a year ago, she worked for 12 years in the federal public service, focusing on greenhouse gas regulatory policy development in the area of oil and gas and electricity, and key files such as coal-fired electricity generation, CO2 regulation, and other similar initiatives. Prior to joining the public service, Kim held various positions during an 18-year career with the industrial gas provider Air Liquide, in development and implementation of industrial gas technology solutions for environmental and industrial processes. Kim has 25 years experience as a professional engineer and has been solving problems with technical solutions. She's got a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Dalhousie and a master's of applied science in chemical engineering in the area of life cycle assessment from the Royal Military College Academy of Canada. So we're glad to have you with us, Kim. Kim's, I believe, in charge of the implementation portion of the roadmap, and will be able to update us on where Fenestration Canada is at. Kim has to leave this call in about a half an hour, so we're going to have time for some questions, but then we'll continue the program once Kim's gone. We certainly look forward, Kim, to an update from you. It's been a while since we've heard from Natural Resources Canada on this issue, so we're very happy that you could join us today, and it's in your hands to continue.
Thank you so much, Al, and thank you, Stefan, to you both for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. This, I think, is my first time doing a virtual. I've done presentations to many people, so forgive me if the formatting is it's a little jumpy, but I think I'm in good hands with Al and Stefan guiding me along. I really want to thank everyone for the opportunity to chat today and offer just a simple update on where we are with the market transformation roadmap for energy efficient equipment in the building sector. I'm not going to kind of go on and on with my introduction, but I am super happy to be here. We're working very closely with Fenestration Canada, as we have always. But I just really feel like these Tech Talks are a great forum for sharing information. I've attended a few myself and learned a lot. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing from you all. Today, I'm sorry I don't have more time, but we can come back and have another possible follow-up conversation another time if you wish. So with that, I'm going to,
No, sounds good. Okay? We can always have you come on another show if we need to, so.
Yeah, it's this is a new thing for me. So with that, I think maybe I'll just begin to try and share my screen.
Please do.
Does that
yes.
work? Yeah. And let's see how this is going to go for us. So this is the one I think we want to share. Are you seeing slides with market transformation roadmap?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. So that should get us in the right place. So thanks everyone for your patience.
Yeah, we're all good now.
Okay, good. And disclaimer for all of those of you who have dogs at home, if anybody barks, there's going to be barking going on here as well. So anyway. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for this opportunity to connect virtually. We appreciate the chance to connect with you all. This is an unprecedented time, and I'm not saying something you don't know. We hope you are all staying safe and that you and your families are okay. And we understand it's tough economically for businesses. We are certainly empathetic and sympathetic with sincere hopes that things are going as best as can be in this context. Today, I will be speaking about the market transformation roadmap with as much information as we know right now. I think we all understand that the future is uncertain, but please understand we're being as flexible as we can as we move forward with this work, and changes might be needed in the future. I think that's just a natural thing for us to acknowledge and think about. So as we begin, I'm just gonna, so Al, are my slides advancing properly? I should be on discussion plan at this point.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Perfect, thanks, Stefan. So to start, we have an outline of the presentation. We'll discuss Canada's goals in terms of energy efficiency. We'll discuss the role that the market transformation plays in achieving these goals. And this will be followed by a discussion of energy efficiency programs and initiatives, which will include the roadmap for market transformation, voluntary programs, and mandatory programs. And finally, I'll close with a few comments on proposed next steps. I have about 26 slides to go through to give time for questions at the end. And again, sorry for my short availability today. I'm going to bring you an overview of those slides. If I've gone over something too quickly, I can go back through it if someone requires. So in terms of Canada's energy efficiency objectives, our energy efficiency goals in Canada are really influenced by our climate change objectives. It's not difficult to make a connection between these goals and the performance of fenestration products. Canada is currently developing a plan to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, and establishing a link between this goal and energy efficiency objectives is important because we know that it's possible to reach about a third of our climate change goals by improving energy efficiency. When we look at GHG reduction initiatives, there have been reports that say that we can achieve about a third of our greenhouse gas objectives through those initiatives. And in terms of the role of the building sector, the energy used for heating and cooling in Canada represents about 12% of our national emissions, which is an important amount. Drilling down further for individual homes, today, fenestration accounts for about a third of the heat loss in Canadian homes. So it's clear that the performance of fenestration products can have significant impacts on our goals. In terms of the importance of improved energy efficiency in the renovation market, going another layer deeper, there is a lot of importance being placed on renovations. The renovation market represents the biggest opportunity for improvements to the housing stock and account for more than half the window sales in Canada, as I'm sure you're all aware. This market is not controlled by National Building Code compliance, so we need measures that can target renovations. You can also see that fenestration products play an important role in achieving emissions goals for this reason. The division I work in is the equipment division inside the Office of Energy Efficiency. I work with Jamie Hewlin. And so I want to present to you a little bit about who we are and what work we're doing. And I think that will help you see the context for the market transformation roadmap, which is this third, I guess, image that you see on the right-hand side of the slide. So Equipment Division is responsible for 3 programs that help with the improvement of product energy efficiency. And those programs are independent of the place of how products are installed and where they're installed. So these programs can help influence the renovations market. As I just alluded, it's quite an important section. First, there is the Energy Star program, which identifies product models of high energy efficiency in order to influence consumers' buying decisions. In addition, Equipment Division also develops and implements the modifications for the federal energy efficiency regulations. And I'll speak a little bit more about those regulations in a moment. But in short, their objective is to eliminate inefficient product models from the market. So these 2 programs together successfully contribute to improve energy efficiency of more than 50 product categories. And NRCan is responsible for the management of those programs, but the innovative work behind the design, production and installation of new technologies is really undertaken by companies like yourselves. Just a minute, I'm going to take a little drink. So the Canadian Fenestration industry has contributed to the great improvement in energy performance of homes and buildings already, and the level of effort required to integrate new technologies is not something we take for granted. We know it can be complicated. There are costs related to the changes, and there are obstacles that we recognize need to be overcome when it comes to successful integration. In order to achieve our ambitious objectives, we need to work together with you all. And having said that, I'd like to talk a little bit more now about how we do that, which we expect could be under the role of the Market Transformation Roadmap. So in here, we're going to talk about policies behind our roadmap, planned projects and activities for this initiative, as well as mandatory and voluntary requirements. Under kind of an overarching umbrella for the Market Transformation Roadmap sits underneath what is called Build Smart, or Canada's building strategy. In 2017, energy ministers from across all Canadian jurisdictions published a document called Build Smart, and it's called Canada's building strategy. That strategy includes elements such as for new buildings, for existing buildings, for equipment, and for research, development and deployment. In the case of the third item, equipment, there was a commitment to develop a roadmap for market transformation in order to guide the way forward for key pieces of equipment. So the roadmap was born out of Canada's building strategy, and we'll see now how that roadmap was set out. The roadmap started with ambitious objectives, including, as you already know, the performance target for residential windows, and that all products for sale in Canada would have a U factor of a minimum of 0.8 between now and 2030. I'll come back to that in a moment. Similarly, not just for windows, but for also space and water heating, a target to have all space and water heating equipment for sale in Canada with an energy efficiency of greater than 100% by 2035 was also set out. And you can appreciate that this level of ambition in terms of space heating, et cetera, gets us into the realm of heat pumps to achieve this level of performance. This is not an easy level of performance to get to with traditional means. So every time we present these ambitious objectives, and I think this is my main message from the slide, we really want to take the time to clarify that even though these are presented as minimum standards, these objectives do not set out a prospective plan for regulations. It's easy to confuse the two, and part of my objective today is to explain the difference. Their use for these targets and application will depend on the state of the technology and the market, of course, and we set these ambitious targets to help us identify what the barriers are and tease out what needs to be done to take those barriers down in order to advance energy efficiency of technology in the market towards these levels of performance. Under the Market Transformation Roadmap, 5 pillars have been identified. And it's important to do this, to think about what kinds of obstacles are posed by the adoption of new technologies. And so those 5 pillars of market transformation include availability, accessibility, awareness, affordability, and acceptance. Availability means when something's not commercially available, we might need to invest, for example, in R&D to develop cost-effective technology to get there. Accessibility, similar, isn't really about how broadly available the technology is, but are there limits for suppliers for supply in the market? So is it accessible to folks who wish to use it? In the third pillar, we talk about awareness, and that really refers to how contractors, designers, and engineers are able to work with those technologies and to consider whether or not they have the knowledge to design and install the technologies that we're talking about. Affordability comes into play. For example, if the cost to install or maintain a technology is imposing a barrier to the adoption of a technology, we might need to think about incentive programs to get that technology to a level of economy of scale that, from learning that, cost to install those technologies could come down. And finally, in acceptance, there are limitations that prevent consumers from leaning into that technology. It's not under the market transformation, but one that's commonly used is the compact fluorescent light bulb technology, which was seen as having very high potential, especially in terms of energy efficiency. But the quality of light that those light bulbs offered some years ago was really impacting consumer acceptance and prevented widespread adoption. Fortunately, I think through R&D, other technologies have come into play. So LED technology for lights have come in. So I think that's really about acceptance. And I think that's probably the best example we wanted to offer today. So a regulation will play an important role in our approach, but a regulation doesn't help us with the stakes at hand with these 5 pillars. So a regulation doesn't help us, for example, with the training of installers, with the consumer's acceptance of a technology. So we need to find ways to knock these barriers down. And that's why we are standing up the market transformation roadmap. In terms of overview of the roadmap implementation activities, you can see this slide takes you from incentives on one side, consistent labeling on the left-hand side, coding and glazing, systems and frameworks. The roadmap outlines a series of activities that are designed to overcome obstacles under the 5 pillars I just talked about. And so this slide shows us a mix of deployment and research activities and development. In the last 2 years, the federal government has announced a number of initiatives and programs that have the potential to influence the market. And I'm going to talk to you about some of those items in the following slides that could help us meet our ambitious objectives and maybe outline how we can also work together. So, for example, the Generation Energy Council's report published in 2018, not part of the roadmap, but this slide on the Generation Council gives you a little bit of an idea of a broader context of work that's going on outside the roadmap. So under the roadmap, we tried to isolate what's happening for key products. Remember, I talked about fenestration, space heating, and water heating. But these products play such a fundamental role in the overall broader building design, we also need to consider them as a whole. So when we go back to 2018, Natural Resources Canada did launch a consultation in order to hear what Canadians thought about energy transition and what was necessary to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. The department received comments and opinions in excess of 300,000 from Canadians who wish to influence future policies and programs. And for the building sector, there were 3 engagements that were informed by views of Canadians. And considering the context we're in now, I just wanted to caveat that some dates and times may be shifting, but what we are sharing with you today is really what's been set out and sits out there in terms of public literature. So first of all, we heard that a building code requiring significant improvements in energy efficiency for major renovations is needed, and it could be presented in 2022 and adopted by, or should be presented in 2022 and adopted by all governments by 2025. We also heard that by 2025, it would be desirable to have all buildings and houses with labels that indicate their energy efficiency. And finally, that by 2040, Canadian houses and buildings be as energy efficient as those in many countries with cold climates. So I want to mention here that labeling initiatives are currently at different stages of development, but they do have the potential to influence the demand for high efficiency products. And all these elements are seen as important to helping us achieve our low carbon future. In addition, in the 2019 budget, this is another announcement that I'm highlighting that's happening kind of outside of all of our work, but gives us the context within which we are working. there are some items found in the 2019 budget, which include last year, the government announced an investment of $1 billion in the improvement of building energy efficiency. And that fund, managed by the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, is currently in the process of developing lending programs for high efficiency projects and technologies through the Green Municipal Fund. Another contextual element that's helpful to think about is the Liberal Party's platform. And the most recent fall election, the Liberal Party did commit to putting in place programs that could improve Canadian home energy efficiency. They announced a subset of activities to help make homes more affordable and to operate and cut emissions to help retrofit up to 1.5 million homes. There are free energy efficiency audits, interest-free loans for renovations of up to $40,000, grants of up to $5,000 for net zero homes, and a $100 million investment in skills development. So while the division I work in is not responsible for developing or implementing any of these programs and initiatives, the links between these commitments and the fenestration market are important to tell the complete story. To understand and to communicate with industries how these programs can work together can help us meet our ambitious objectives. And at the end of the day, if a company wants to understand the requirements that it needs to respect and be confident to invest and plan to sell its products into the future, these measures may be helpful. And given these ones I've just highlighted that were recently announced, I think we really do need to develop and present a clear plan to industry. For the moment, we're going to talk about the programs, though, which are actually in our purview and our responsibility. So I'm going to move back from big picture into, well, what can we control? And so back to the role of mandatory standards versus voluntary programs. So there are types of regulatory requirements that I think have been a key topic of conversation since before I've arrived at the division, and I know there's been a lot of conversation. There are three aspects for which we can establish product requirements, including in the fenestration area. We can prescribe the minimum standard that needs to be respected and target the inefficient part of the market, raise the bar for places where products performance needs to be improved. And so that would be through regulations. We can also implement mandatory labeling requirements, and we can mandate reporting of products sold in Canada. What we can't do is mandate where things are used or how they're installed. So our authority is really limited in terms of a mandatory requirement to the performance of the product in its end use application. So that's what we can regulate, but then who's affected by the federal regulations? In energy efficiency regulations, these apply to dealers who import to Canada products for sale or rent, which fall under the regulation, or who ship from one province to another, products for sale or lease. An energy efficiency regulation defines a dealer as someone who is considered to be engaged in the business of manufacturing, importing, or selling or renting products obtained directly from either a manufacturer or an importer. All of these provisions are set out in the energy efficiency regulations right now. Responsibility for dealers. As a dealer, you would have the responsibility to ensure all products, I'm operating two things at once here, sorry. For the responsibility of dealers, dealers are responsible to ensure that all products are covered by the regulations and that they meet the standards. They are also responsible to ensure that a report is presented and that an energy efficiency verification mark is applied. There can be sometimes confusion around what can we do in terms of the federal regulations and our jurisdiction. It's important to understand how the federal regulations work and the jurisdiction. So we thought we'd just take a minute and try and describe that with a very simple slide here. As we've mentioned, the federal regulation is applicable to suppliers who import products to Canada or who ship them across borders. I always think about things as if it's moving across a border, it's a federal jurisdiction. But if you produce and sell a product within a province, or if you produce a product and sell it outside of Canada, the federal regulation doesn't apply to your product. So there are limitations to what we can apply our minimum standards to. And so that's an important, I think, nuance to appreciate. I think especially if you're in a province where your manufacturing and a lot of your market sits inside that province. So setting out a regulation in federal regulation wouldn't touch those products at this point. And that could be good, but that can also be bad. So it's just an important element to pay attention to. Also want to juxtapose the mandatory program of regulations with the Energy Star requirements and certification. A lot of people mix these programs up, and it's easy to do so because they have a few similarities, but I just wanted to take you down through to highlight that federal regulations are different from Energy Star. Most obviously, a federal regulation is a mandatory program, whereas an Energy Star program is voluntary. Folks don't have to participate in the Energy Star program, but we're very happy when they do. And we think that it's actually really great for all folks involved when Energy Star certification is applied and the label is applied. The federal regulation applies to all products that meet the definitions. So another difference is the volume of data that we collect if you apply regulation to something is tremendously higher than if we are just talking about something with an Energy Star requirement. In addition, for regulated efficiency requirements, there's also a consultation process with all stakeholders. So we use detailed cost-benefit analysis to inform decisions around the design of a regulation and therefore the adoption of a minimum standard. This analysis is done working together with stakeholders. So we collect the information and we need to be able to determine how a standard could impact Canadians and our producers in Canada before we set minimum efficiency standards. So that's a really, generally my experience as a federal regulator, it's generally a 2-year process. Sometimes it can be faster, but to take the time and make sure that everything is accounted for in the regulation, this is something that we take very seriously, and of course is a requirement for how federal regulations are set out. That's a little different from how Energy Star works. For the Energy Star program, the objective is to pull the market ahead for energy efficiency. It's not to kind of cut off the bottom poor performers, but it's instead to kind of pull ahead the market itself. And so it's a much more market-driven approach. Improvements in energy efficiency requirements are informed by the status of the market and to strive to achieve to set a performance at 20% in the market. So generally, we're usually kind of looking at a top bar approach for Energy Star, and it's really just trying to get more and more products being sold at that high level of performance. It's not mandatory. But these two approaches do work tremendously well together as a way to improve the market because Energy Star can influence a decision, and as a market begins to evolve, it can also increase our comfort level to be able to move to regulated requirements over time. So the two kind of work together. Again, when we talk about a regulation, as I'd mentioned, that process to submit your comments and your information does help us formulate a decision on how the policy will work. And finally, from a labeling perspective, the federal regulations could define a mandatory verification mark that is required for products. So labeling can be regulated, and I think that's an important consideration for this community. I think it's something we need to think about. This could be applied using a third-party verification, much the same as the Energy Star does, but the difference lays in that the regulated requirements for labeling could be mandatory, whereas, as I mentioned before, Energy Star is a voluntary process. In terms of energy efficiency standards, codes, and regulations in Canada, there are already some requirements that exist across Canada currently. We have the National Building Code that applies to new buildings in the provinces that have adopted it. We also have an Energy Star program for which requirements were increased in January for fenestration products. And there are 2 provinces in Canada that have regulations that are applied within the provincial borders. And I think they're proposing new standards, which you probably well know as well. And we also have the federal regulation presented here. So I'll give you a second to take a look. In terms of compliance and enforcement, we do foresee some challenges, and this is where some work is required. If we were to do regulatory work on windows, there are 2 major challenges which we need your help with. First of all, given that compliance takes place at provincial borders, we need to really be sure we had a realistic system for monitoring the movement of products to make sure that we had a level playing field for all manufacturers and dealers as they are defined. So such a system doesn't yet exist. And so finding a solution to that, to make sure enforcement is done appropriately, is important when we're thinking about if a regulation is an appropriate route to making sure that the market for fenestration is improved. We also see another challenge ahead of us in the application of a federal regulation, and that's linked to a certification system. So given that each window needs to be certified to respect standards, there'd be a significant increase in the number of products that would need to be tested. So again, you know, understanding the suite of complexity for different designs for windows, I think that's something we would need your help with to understand how would we go about doing that. So we would need to ensure there is, of course, adequate certification capacity if we were ever to regulate. We need to make sure that manufacturers had sufficient lead time to apply certification requirements if ever we chose to regulate. And we'd also need to have the appropriate parameters in place to define what it means to be an energy efficient product. And so this is why, you know, we're a little challenged with making sure, you know, thinking about how do you regulate windows in Canada. And so obviously we need to have a conversation about that if folks are still thinking about what a regulation would look like in Canada for windows. And like I said, we have taken no decisions at all. And I'll be reiterating that further and further through this slide deck. So I think finally, just to round out the slide, we'd also need to find an approach that minimizes the negative impacts on Canadian producers. So that's those are all the things that we think about as federal regulators. Stefan, how am I doing? I think I'm going over my own time limit.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure for you mostly.
Yeah,
we do have
I have about 4 more slides.
Okay.
So I think, and I will take the time to take some questions. I won't run away.
Okay,
so,
that works.
Great, thanks. There's a lot of information, and we wanted to be clear about sharing it.
Yeah. No, that's
so in
good.
terms of labeling, I think this is an important slide for us to think about in the general design of a regulation. We also need to think about the role of labels. We could think about labels on their own. We also understand there's costs associated with the labels, but there could be advantages that could contribute to the objectives of advancing the energy efficiency market. We're considering options in this area, and more and more consultations, as I think I just mentioned, are needed to figure out what works best. So we haven't taken any decisions about what a label would look like, or even what an approach for a regulatory approach would look like. We really do need to have a lot of consultation. I want to acknowledge that I think there was a paper produced a little more than a year ago, and I think it was a really great paper, but I think we really need to, I think what we heard back was we need to slow down and really understand some of these issues that we're bringing forward today, so that we can properly go forward with an approach that works for everyone. Finally, what metrics, I guess, finally, I just want to talk about a little bit about what metrics. This is for me, this is the elephant in the room sometimes. I'm a technical person, so I tend to go to where are the metrics. And so we really need to talk to folks around what metrics are appropriate. We understand that there are some serious and important conversations needed around U factor, solar heat gain coefficient, and energy rating. And I think we just want to flag that we're going to need your feedback and advice to consider what metric would be appropriate if we were to ever consider putting forward a regulation. So I know we've had a lot of people ask us, well, where's the regulation? On the other hand, we've had a lot of people ask us about market transformation. I think these are the kinds of elements we can consider through market transformation and learn from, and also while we're trying to take down some of the barriers, so that we can begin to advance our thinking on first of all, what are voluntary requirements and what are also mandatory requirements in future. So I feel like we're coming to a full stop, 60 kilometers an hour to zero in a second. But summary and next steps, we've talked about Canada's broad perspective, all of the federal initiatives that are out there. I think we all understand why it's important for us to continue to communicate. And I think market transformation roadmap through the what we were calling the implementation teams and the fenestration group, which FENCAN is very, very involved in. We really do need to have those conversations to help us advance our thinking. There's a broader initiative that's not specific to Windows that you can see from this presentation, gives a context, but when we drill in terms of the tools that the equipment division has, there are still initiatives that we can help move forward to advance the technology for fenestration. And, we just really would like to continue to engage with you and hear from you. We know we're going through an uncertain time right now, so it's a bit of a challenging time to set out a long-term view on what will happen. I don't think anyone would believe us if we said that, but at the same time, we do want to share with you today where we want to go. Subject to the current circumstances related to this pandemic, we will be launching stakeholder consultations this fall. I've been in conversation with a number of the folks who are interested in the roadmap work. We are internally, we're still doing our thinking, and we think we've done a fair bit. I would like to actually come out with a more specific broad update for a broader audience as well around market transformation roadmap. And I would really like to work with you all, with Fenestration Canada and all of the fenestration community. I think there's so many different aspects that we need to think about. It's not straightforward from a federal perspective, but we want to get it right and we want to take it in the right steps. So just want to thank you all for your time and your patience. I see a few red pieces coming in on the top of my screen. I think that means that there are probably questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and be happy to stick around and answer whatever I can.
Great. So just so you know, we have like 5 questions. So we'll, I know to be mindful of time. If you need to leave, just let us know. But we'll try to go through them quickly. And I believe we'll keep going even when Kim leaves. We'll keep going all the way to I think it was 2:30, so Eastern time. So we have Patrick Flannery. You mentioned a model code. So he's asking, is it envisioned that this model code for renovations would become part of the National Building Code?
So that's it's a good question, really great question. As you probably know, the National Building Code is managed by the National Research Council. We play a huge role in it through a number of initiatives through Office of Energy Efficiency, but there are many of you who are also playing a role. I don't know how that will roll out. I'm not in a position to be able to say how those things will converge. But certainly, I think what we're hearing is there's need not just for a national code for new, but a need for retrofits and for large renovations. And I think some guidance is required. So it would make sense, but I'm certainly not in a place to be able to say definitively that that would be where it would sit.
Okay. We have someone asking, Canada's performance targets appear to address only residential windows. Does that mean that swinging type doors, sliding doors, and skylights are excluded or exempt?
Well, I think the targets are aspirational goals, so there's no clear definition for exactly the scope on which they apply. But I think if they're aspirational goals, they should be applying to everything. I mean, to me, if we're going to get there, we need to think about how it impacts all products. I think in a broader context, we don't expect everyone to reach 0.8 by 2030, and we've already had some great conversations with you, Stefan, and with Al about that. But what we do want to understand is what are the barriers that are stopping folks from getting closer to 0.8?
Well, yeah,
and if we can get to 0.8, that'd be great.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. That's a good because you're mentioning that the other comment that we add right now, the one right now is rushing to 0.8 by 2030 will potentially put 75% of small manufacturers in Canada out of business. That's Steve saying that. This type of window requires a complete change of the business plan and manufacturing process. Comparing the failure of fluorescent light bulb acceptance and the quick switch to LED bulb is not realistic. A light bulb is $4 and lasts a year. The window package is 20,000 to 100 and will last 25 years. Unlike a light bulb, it cannot be thrown away or if you don't like the result. There are not hundreds of small Canadian companies making light bulbs, only half a dozen multinationals worldwide. This rush to acceptance can be a disaster for industry. Only the big guys or cheap imports will benefit. So that's that's one personal opinion from a member here, but I thought to share it with you because that's something we also hear.
Yes. And this is why, Steve, I'm not sure which company you're with, but it doesn't matter to me. This is why it's really important for us to hear these comments and for us to understand what pressures you're feeling. We did sort of allude to, there are cost implications to moving here. And I know we've heard, in past, some people say, well, why not just create the market by setting the regulation? Well, I'm not sure that that's really the way people want us to do it either. So what we're looking for is to find a way to thread this needle, and that's so we appreciate your comment very much. Thank you.
Great.
And you're
so
right. It's not a
yeah. I have one more question. So we have more questions. We have like 6. I'll ask one more, and then we have someone who wants to speak with us, if you don't mind, and then after that we'll see if you need to go. So Pauline's asking, how closely do you work with Efficiency Canada? Efficiency Canada presenter, because we had a presentation just before this one, said that net zero building can be met with current technologies. Therefore, does it still make sense to spend a large amount of effort and money on new technologies? So I know that also Al touched on that.
Yeah, I'm not going to try and get into where Efficiency Canada is coming up with that statement, but I think that's where the holistic approach really comes into play. And whether or not we use a prescriptive approach or a holistic approach can play a role in that. We do work, to answer the question, we do work with Efficiency Canada. They know us well, they know our programs well, and from time to time, we've been in discussions with them. We're certainly watching their I'm forgetting what it's called, but where they published it last year about, what level of efficiency exists in various provinces. There's a little bit of a temperature check on efficiency. So we do work with them. I'm not in a position to kind of unpack where that statement comes from for them.
So I have one last question before I get so Dave Goldsmith wants to speak with us. But I think I'm going to ask you this question because I think it's a question that a lot of people are wondering about. So Cam Drew is asking, have the aspirational goals been put on hold, or do you still have proposed U-value requirements going forward? So like, you have a clear answer to that. Like, is it on hold? Where are we on that?
Well, so the aspirational goal is aspirational. So, but it's not on hold. It's, we continue to want to work toward that goal. I think I did mention, we said 2030. Again, it's aspirational. So I can't say that something is on hold. I think we have to continue to understand the issues. This is what this conversation is about, to understand what the concerns are and begin really to roll up our sleeves. And I would really like to start to do that this fall, to understand where those barriers are so we can begin to take them down over time. I mean, it's 2020 and it's only 10 years away. But if we can get closer to that by 2028 or so, wouldn't that be nice? So I'd like to understand.
So we have Dave. I'll bring Dave Goldsmith in, and just so you know, if you need to leave after, what we'll do, I'll just send you the rest of this whole like the questions, and I'll have Al
Okay,
answer what he can, and feel free to
great.
go look at the link, and you'll also get the feedback of the membership here. So Dave,
Oh,
you should be able to talk in a second.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I don't know if NRCan is aware, but the BC Ministry of Energy, Mines and Petroleum Resources has declared their clear intent to regulate windows to the U1.60 target for 2022 in order to be in alignment with the anticipated federal regulations, which are starting to look a lot more doubtful than they may have, because you need to do all your due diligence on how it's going to impact the industry and all of that. So one of Fenestration Canada's main concerns, and FenBC, is if those two are not aligned, and the province of BC have also declared that they're going to be doing enforcement at the points of manufacture and points of distribution. But the federal government, if they don't pass the regulation, they're not going to be doing enforcement of imported products, which could result in quite a large problem. So I just wonder if you would consider making contact with Cam Shook of BC's Ministry of Energy, Mines and Petroleum Resources, and discussing this problem and potential solutions, perhaps in partnership with either FEN Canada or FEN BC.
Be happy to have that conversation anytime. I have a monthly call with Cam, so I'm well aware of their proposed approach for the application of the U factor 1.6. I know that, of course, timing is also up in the air. I wasn't aware that I will circle back with Cam to clarify, their statement that it's to be in alignment with the federal regulation, because I think, it's a chicken and egg thing. To me, it's BC moving forward. Obviously, alignment between provinces and across Canada and between federal regulations is always favorable, and it's something we work on continuously. So I will certainly circle back with Cam to make sure that I understand the parameters based on what you've just shared. Dave, thanks so much. But we certainly are aware, and we are in regular consultation with BC.
Thank you.
It is ultimately up to them what they do.
Oh, sorry, I just got off there. I thought we were done. I'm sorry, Dave. So Kim, I think you need to leave now, or
Yeah.
do you start? Yeah, okay. So we'll keep going with the show here for a couple more minutes with Al. We do have other comments. We'll touch on them, and feel free to go look at those afterward. And I think if you don't mind, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, but at some point, if you want to come back on the show in the next few weeks or month, I think that would be great. So
my pleasure to help with the conversation. I have been a taker from the conversation, so I'd like to help out as well.
Perfect. So Al, you're muted. I think you're trying to speak.
Thank you for taking this time with us, and we'll continue discussions.
Okay, I'm going to hit the leave button right now.
Great.
Thanks so much, everyone. I hope this was
Thank you.
helpful.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, so Al, we do have other question here. Do you want to start with that, or do you have any comments about everything that was said before?
I think, well, it's interesting that it sounds like they're willing to be flexible on the future.
Yeah.
And this has been my thinking as well, is that their aspirational goals need to be achievable with today's technology. And over the last while, my initial thought is that they might have to reduce their goals to something more achievable.
Mhm.
But I've also learned that some window manufacturers are designing products that are so close to 0.8, and they're doing it with exactly today's technology, which is a triple glazed unit and 2 low-E coatings. And so if you have a non-metal frame, and if you can accommodate a triple glazed unit, you can get down to pretty much, spitting distance of 0.8 just by aligning your frame geometry, just by being smart about how you design the profile.
Mhm.
And things like maximizing the glass area, making the profile portion as narrow as possible, does the trick. So, so I think on the one hand, the good news is they're not going to force the industry to do the impossible. We're not looking for some new technology that will be disruptive to the industry, except for, the future is clearly going in the direction of triple glazing. So, so the fact is, to get to the energy performance goals, either of the market transformation program to net zero, which is the building codes are trying to get to net zero, this is us taking us, we're going to have to go into a triple glazed world to do that. And so I think we're going to end up in a triple glazed world, but I don't think it's going to be radically different from what we're doing today. But I think smart design will make it possible for those who have not yet introduced triple glazed products. You might actually have an advantage over products in the marketplace in that if you design smart, you might actually be able to squeeze a little more performance out of the system than you would if you weren't paying attention to that frame geometry and frame design very carefully. So, so I think those are just my comments. Like I say, the good news is we're not going to be heavily regulated. We're not going to be pushed around. We're not going to be put out of business.
Yeah.
Right. And they're looking to be reasonable on and somewhat flexible in that regard. At the same time, though, there are larger trends such as the tiered code approach, which is underway in BC. And if it doesn't make it into this code cycle in the national code, it'll make it into the next code cycle probably. And so the goals may actually get pushed out to 2035 or a little bit farther. So I think what this tells me is that we shouldn't panic as an industry, that I think the steps taken in this direction are going to be reasonable and achievable. And I think the government realizes there's going to be a need for a market for these products. And that market can only come through tiered codes, step codes. And so they're going to have time to let that process play itself out in order to create the business conditions for those new markets.
Yeah.
So to my mind, I think that's encouraging.
And so what I got also from it is, as you said, they have goals, but it really feels, and we felt that in the past few months also, and that they want to work with us, and this kind of change of pace, if you will, I think it's proof of that. And she mentioned that when we were talking about the 0.8 in 2030. She did mention the talks that she had with you, and how, is it possible, and how do we get there? So I feel that we do have a lot to bring to the table, and they're there to listen. So, anyone on the call right now, and like to Steve's point, we have people who are panicking or who are worried about what's going to happen, but just know that we do have a voice. So when we say stuff like that, and when we let them know, they do listen, and they do take it into consideration, and then we work with them to get to where we need to go as an industry, and what they need to do. So and I know, Al, that you've been working more and more with them. You're in the task group now. So so if you say you're confident that we're being listened to, I think we still know, we just if you're confident, we just have to understand that we do have stuff to bring to the table, and that they're going to listen, and not to be too worried. Is that your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we've had one meeting with them in February.
Yeah.
And we've probably had I've had one or two
Couple
phone calls with
Yeah.
her. So it's not like we've done a lot of work together, but we've clearly communicated that that their aspirational goal has to be based on today's technology that can be implemented, and that they can't push, that it's just unrealistic to expect anything else from the industry, and also, so it's clear that they understand that, and so I think as I say, what we're hearing today is these are aspirational goals. Don't stress it. It might not be 2030. You know, we can't tell you yet that it may not be 2030, but you know, the reality is that you know, it largely does depend still on the code process and how that's going to play out, as well as market conditions and what will happen to the economy with the pandemic. So I think we have a government that is, you know, has a clear plan of where they want to go, but I think they're going to be realistic in the steps they take to get there.
But you do understand too that from what I hear, and you know, we have some questions in that goes that way. Like for example, Kendra just wrote, you know, do we know what their current goals and dates are? You know, so it's I can understand also why it could be frustrating because we don't have like we have a set of clear dates and goals, but what we hear is that it's aspirational. So for manufacturers to move and actually, you know, invest and go this route, you know, a lot of people they need insurance that this is going to actually happen and when to plan it efficiently. So there's also this side too when it's I don't want maybe like I don't know if it's the right word, but when it's kind of stalling, it puts you know it's not that people don't want to embrace the change, but they want to make sure change is going to happen. And you know what do you have to say about that?
I guess maybe what I'm hearing is that maybe people are saying, "Whoa, I've just introduced a new product line. Did I do that too soon? Does it mean that I won't have customers for it? You know, is that the fear?" Maybe we should open up to our callers now and to actually continue discussion.
Yeah, so we have a lot of questions. Patrick's asking, will there be money for manufacturers for R&D? So it was probably a question for Kim, but we did touch on this topic a little bit with them. It's part of the research.
It did sound that she said that, you know, potentially if there's a need that there could be money available, right? On the other hand, in terms of R&D, you know, the aspirational goals are set at 0.8. And we have Canadian manufacturers with products right now. I actually did an analysis of the products in the Energy Star database, looking at operable products, looking at the Energy Star most efficient, and looking at the lowest U values available in that database. And it was very interesting. Actually, I've got a few slides on that. But essentially, I don't know that we need any R&D. We can design windows that are almost 0.8 using triple pane glass and 2 low E coatings. And it's just a case of the design of the profiles. Unless you're in a metal system, yes, then you've got to work with thermal breaks and things like that. But you know, we have a global industry making passive house windows that are at the 0.8 level in the European system, maybe the 0.9 level in the North American system. And we know how to design those windows. You know, you just look at the cross sections and you get the idea. So I don't think there's a real need for R&D here so much as there is understanding we have the tools we need. And the question is, when will the market for those tools show up?
Yeah, and what the help for the onboarding process will be too. Like maybe we have the know-how, but we still need to implement it like on a large scale. So that might be something we work on too. We have quite a lot of questions here. Pauline saying, regarding challenge to ramping up certification, a thought for future labs have collected a lot of data over the past couple of decades. Maybe a matrix could be developed based on this data so SMEs can plug in details and find meaningful ratings without resimulating everything. So
by SMEs, I'm assuming she means small and medium enterprises.
I would guess so.
Right. And well, you know, here's the thing. Most of the ratings we have historically are not at the level of performance that they're aiming for, right? So we probably don't have as many existing certifications as you know, as would be helpful if you want to learn from them. So, however, I think there's a lot to be learned about window design by looking at the designs of windows that have really good performance attributes. And I think there is, well, and one reason I dug into the Energy Star database, and maybe just let me show you a couple of slides from that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think it might be interesting for our participants to look at that. Just going to share my screen. Okay, there we go. So, the current Energy Star criteria for Windows is at 1.22 maximum U factor. And that's a triple glaze product. There's not very many framing systems that would get there with, let's say, a double glazed unit with a room side coating. So pretty much Energy Star today is at the level of a triple glaze product. But I looked into the Energy Star database and I looked at not how many product models there are, because there's thousands of product models. I looked at how many companies, how many manufacturers actually have products in the most efficient category. And I looked at and I looked only at products that qualified under U value. I filtered out the ones that qualified on energy rating, because in the future regulations, they're talking about not using energy rating. They're talking just using U value to get to those 2030 goals. Just to get an idea of how many of these kind of products do we have in the market today. And so this is what I found. We had, if we look at awning windows, we have 288 manufacturers in Canada. These are companies, 288 distinct companies, which have awning products in the database, and the highest U value you can have for most efficient is 1.05. So I listed the lowest U value in the database for each product type. So we had products at 0.8 in the database. I looked at casement windows, 265 manufacturers offering single casement product, and the lowest U value, several manufacturers had products at 0.8. Double hung windows, we have 46 manufacturers of Energy Star most efficient. The lowest U value was 1. Double slider, 0.9. So we've got sliding windows that are 39 manufacturers offer most efficient. A couple of them are down at 0.9. You look at down this whole table, and you get the idea that we already have products that are between 0.7 and 1.0 in every product category in Energy Star, admittedly with various numbers of manufacturers participating. For example, 546 manufacturers have a fixed picture window in the Energy Star most efficient. That's easy product to get it with. So, but basically this is telling me we have the technology. None of these companies are using vacuum glass. None of these companies are using some kind of secret technology. Most of them are vinyl window products. And so this tells me that we do have what it takes. And it tells me that the aspirational goals might be are achievable. In some cases, to get down to 0.8 or less, we're using not very optimal glass packages. We're using like a triple silver with a double silver with a room side coating. That's going to be a window with fairly low visible transmittance and may not be very popular with customers. They might prefer something with more visible light transmittance. So when you put in a more balanced glass package, you might have trouble getting to 0.8, maybe right around 0.9 or around 1. But what it tells me is that, I think the aspirational goals are going to be moderated to something that's achievable. And clearly something in the range of 1 is achievable. If I filtered the list for a U factor of 1, I would have a lot more, there'd be lots of products, a lot more products in that category. So I think it's just helpful to appreciate that. And this is something I wanted to show her as well. But basically, this isn't going to be rocket science. These are achievable goals. The question is, will there be a market for these products? And do can I afford to add a product line for which there won't be customers? And I think that's where the curve that the Energy Efficiency Canada guy had, like a bell curve going up and down. And he showed that at the beginning, it's the early adopters, right? There are some companies that are able to jump at the opportunity. They have the capital to add a product line. They see the advantage of being first in the market, and they start up. Initially, the demand is low, and these companies go to fill that demand. Over time, the demand grows and more companies participate. And then at some point, you're at a stage where it's in a minority of companies that no longer have products, and regulation might be needed to kind of, essentially get everyone on board. But I think they understand that, you're going to need the building codes to create the market for those products. And I don't think the government is going to force the industry to lose money to get to this goal. I think they understand they're going to have to help to create the pull through building codes, and they're going to have to adjust their timelines to what is achievable. I really think that is the way it's going to play out. And I think that has to be our position as Fenestration Canada. That's how we would like the government to proceed, so that this is a process that is not harmful to the industry, but that allows the industry to participate as part of a larger project to get the whole construction industry onto a different footing 15, 20 years down the road.
We have Laura asking, because you just showed up, you just showed your the Energy Star review, like the study you got there. She's asking, are these products showed in there and manufacturers, are they mostly from BC? Like, is there a way for you to know, like, these ones, are they mostly from BC, or were they?
I was surprised. They're across Canada.
Okay.
Tons of companies in Quebec, companies, I don't know all the brands and manufacturers' names. So, the companies with English names, I'm not sure what provinces they're in, but I recognize there's a whole bunch of names I know are not BC names. So this seems to be pretty broadly distributed across the country from what I can see.
Good. Yeah. So we have quite a lot of questions. I'll try to go quickly here. So Jesse says he agrees with you. Definitely possible. Almost everyone has access to similar dual low-E triple glazing, mostly just the frames that are different between manufacturers. We have Brad saying NRCan has not yet provided any details on their price / cost payback analysis that initially stated that they would target. The work was completed, but not yet shared. I would encourage us to reach out and request this data so we can review. So just so you know, that's Brad's point here. So maybe we can make a note. And
well, that's a good question. If there is research they've done that they've committed to do that they haven't shared, that would be good to know. One thing that I think we discussed a few weeks back on Tech Talk when we had the fellow with Stepwin Software talking is that, these triple glazed windows are going to be more expensive than the windows we're making today. However, when the energy codes start asking for a higher level of performance based on energy modeling, based on, for example, like in the tiered code, the value to the builder of a high performance window increases, because the window being the biggest energy loser in the house, when you can significantly reduce the heat loss from the window, it means they might not have to put in a heat pump. They might be able to reduce the amount of insulation that they would have to put in the code prescriptively. But when they do a performance model on the building, they realize I didn't need that much insulation. All I needed was better windows and a few other things. And all of a sudden, the windows that cost more actually save money on the build, on the whole house. And so the value proposition under a tiered code of that triple glazed window is higher than the value proposition is in the way buildings are built today. Under today's code, the payback period can't be justified maybe to go to triple glazed windows. But when it actually makes the house cheaper to build, at that point, it's a whole different value proposition.
Okay.
And this is what is starting to show up, in BC under the STEP code. So, and so I think that's a dynamic that our industry has not yet experienced in most of the country. But I think that is going to be part of the business, the value of these products to the marketplace,
Okay.
as the codes go in that direction.
Okay. So we'll have Dave Goldsmith in a couple minutes here. He wants to address a problem he would see with this this whole thing. So I'll just
Okay.
go through a couple more questions here just to make sure we touch. We try to answer everyone. We have like 12 open questions right now. So I'm trying to go through all of it here. So Brad is mentioning too, in response to meeting a 0.8 level, there is a real concern from very durable aluminum clad wood windows who use stainless steel spacer and would be concerned with overall long-term durability. In addition, the 0.8 level will drastically change the purchase landscape of operating products like vertical and horizontal sliders. I would want to see if there is a need to drop the level to 0.8 to meet net zero energy. There is a law of diminishing return that will be likely raised up.
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, there are certain operating types of windows that we like to use in different parts of the country. So sliding windows are popular. In some places, vertical sliding windows are popular. And it may not be realistic to achieve 0.8 with products like that. And frankly, it might be a lot more realistic for the target to be set closer to 1.0 or maybe leave it at 1.05. Right? The U value for Energy Star most efficient is 1.05. That's really not that far from 0.8 at that point. And so, the end goal, maybe the end goal of the market transformation program is Energy Star most efficient. I mean, we're already have hundreds of products, hundreds of manufacturers offering products in that space. And it would not be super disruptive to the industry for more manufacturers to join them as they see the business case in doing that. So I think the point is well taken, and you don't necessarily need to be at 0.8 in a net zero home, right? It's the whole building energy model. The 0.8 product might give you a higher window to wall ratio, so there might still be a place for it in the marketplace. But that might not be the point at which you regulate. The regulation point maybe should be, higher than that. So I think there's room and there's time to sort these things out. Clearly, they've indicated they're not going to take a heavy-handed approach, and I think, but Brad's got a good point.
Okay.
It's a somewhat arbitrary goal.
I'll let Dave in for talk to us.
Guys.
Yeah, there you go. I'll give
Yeah,
you.
I just wanted to point out something that might require some research. It's well known that there's a condensation problem on the highest performance glazing available relating to condensation on surface one. And the physics of it are quite simple. That outermost light has a low E coating on the interior surface, but it does not have a low E coating on the outside. So it will reject heat from the inside, but it will readily radiate heat from the surface one to the night sky and become colder than the air, and therefore reach the dew point temperature. And so we have some customers who are ordering these options right now in custom homes, and they're the view windows looking out over their $1 million view over the valley. They get up in the morning to have their morning coffee and they can't see out their very expensive high performance windows. So that's going to be a real barrier to market acceptance that we may have to ask the glass suppliers to look into a solution, some kind of coating on surface one.
It's a good point, Dave, because it is frustrating to consumers who say, I paid extra money for these high performance windows and now I can't enjoy my view. Now, granted, that's not every day of the year, but I can understand why people would be frustrated by that. And there might be solutions to that problem, both on the glass coating side and possibly also on the building design side, where maybe there's a way that heat can be somehow radiated, onto the glass in some way, later, just to make sure, like a defrost kind of approach where you have to defrost. If you want to pay a little extra more energy, defrost your windows on the outside so you can enjoy the view. But it's a good point. I think it's really, if there was an elegant technical solution with glass to solve that, I think that could be something people would be willing to pay extra for.
Okay, so does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. So I have another question here. So Don is asking, why are there 288 companies that meet highest levels for awnings, but only 18 for fixed awnings in your in what you showed with Energy Star, I guess?
I have no idea. I was surprised to see that. It could be just that they just wanted maybe to get a product into the database, and they maybe didn't, maybe they figured it was enough just to get their awning in. Maybe they're not counting on a lot of sales at this point. They just want to have a placeholder so that they can say they're Energy Star most efficient. And maybe they just haven't bothered to include all their options in the database. So, I mean, technically, there's no reason why a fixed awning should perform materially differently than an awning. So yeah, I don't think there's any technical reason for that. It's probably just they didn't see any business value in paying to have more products qualified there.
Okay. We have Patrick asking, how can you enforce without labels?
That's a good question. I don't think you can, right?
Okay.
I think labels will be essential, and it'll probably, I would expect that they will probably want some kind of mandatory certified labeling of windows. And I think, frankly, to keep the industry honest, you need something like that, right? I mean, the manufacturers that actually spend the money to develop such a product, and then you don't want to be losing business to someone who's selling clear triple glazing as equivalent to your product, and faking the label. So I think, I don't know that the industry would be opposed to labeling just for the sake of the fairness for the people whose products really do perform and want to be recognized that way.
Okay, we have Jesse asking, any thoughts on different targets for different types of windows? Picture versus operable, for example. Pointed is easier to achieve on a picture versus a casement with the same kind of glass.
Well, yeah, that gets kind of to the previous point, but yes, it might be, the targets might need to be adjusted to either allow for that by being raised across the board, or potentially have different targets for different operating types. But he's got a good point. Certain operating types obviously will not achieve the same as a fixed window, and this is where I think we also need to find a way to help the energy advisors. When they are working on the building energy model, they're thinking they're looking for a number they can apply to every window, and the reality is that different operating types are going to have different U values, different solar heat gain coefficients. So I think it may very well be necessary to either regulate and also get the energy modelers to understand that that you can't have a uniform value for all the products on a house. So,
okay. Someone anonymous here. It's good to see so many manufacturers currently make high efficiency products, as we saw in your slides. But it would be good to know how much they contribute as a percentage of total annual sales, as that gives an indication of market acceptance of such high efficiency windows.
But that's a good question, and I don't know that we have answers to those questions.
But that's something that would be interesting to know. Like,
if this is the thing. I mean, FGIA, for example, publishes. They've announced that their semi-annual or market survey is out. This is something Fenestration Canada might want to, work with our members on, is to come up with some kind of market survey of what's actually being sold as opposed to what's in the Energy Star
Yeah,
database.
we're actually working on that. It's already happening, but yes. So
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, information like that would be helpful, and you know, and it would be interesting to see geographically, to see, you know, let's say province by province, because we might find that, I'm sure we'll find that in Manitoba, nobody makes a double glazed window. We might be surprised to see how much triple glazing is actually used in BC, maybe more than people would think. And we might be surprised at what we see in some other provinces too. But we clearly have people making triple glazed windows coast to coast. And, you know, it's just that in some places that's an unusual product, and in other places it's the standard product.
okay. John's asking, do you anticipate a federal or provincial incentive or grant program for consumers to help boost these initiatives?
I think that might very well come. And I kind of heard Kim hinting at that, you know, the government seems to, she was mentioned, the Liberal government has some budget money set aside to incentivize, you know, certain things. And so there might very well be money for incentive programs to do this. And in over the past few years, I've been involved in a few years back, maybe going back 4 years now, at RDH, we did a study for the government, for the BC government, on these questions, and you know, we identified some barriers that government funding or something like a tax rebate or some kind of financial incentive would help to spur the development and the demand for these kind of products. So I think if they're serious about transforming the marketplace, they're going to have to put money into some incentives as well. I think the building code incentives alone will not create enough demand to transform the industry coast to coast, but they could play a significant role in boosting the availability of products, and especially for the replacement market, to make those products affordable in the replacement market. So I think there is definitely room for that, and will probably be necessary to get wider use of these products in the replacement market, along the lines of what Mr. Ballard said for Passive House, you know, and the huge need to upgrade existing buildings. So
We have another question here that I feel is basically in the same topic here. What incentives would be available for end user or builders to go with these high efficiency products whose costs may be higher than lower efficiency products that are still acceptable and meet criteria under performance path? I think it's around the same thing.
basically the same question. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it will be necessary for them to introduce incentives. I think it would be wise for them to introduce incentives. And while the code can drive the adoption of these products in the new construction market, because they don't have any active enforcement on the replacement market, that's probably the place where they should target their incentives, is in the window replacement area, to make the high performance products more affordable, more competitive with your standard product, and where you can also sell them on their comfort basis. Because it's not just a case of payback. You know, if you're sitting somewhere where you're cold beside your windows in the wintertime, and you're wearing sweaters if you have to sit near the window, and you understand how much more comfortable you'd be with a triple glazed window, that comfort alone, some people want to experience it, will realize it's worth the money. And when you add some financial incentives that make that product cost competitive with let's say a double glazed product, that could really stimulate the use of these products in renovation. And arguably, that's where they're going to make the biggest impact on the energy use of the country. Is, you know, we renovate probably more buildings than we build in Canada, and that would make sense. So,
yeah. So we have Tracy saying the risk of that is that they use less windows to meet code, to achieve code. So just a comment.
well, I guess the risk of more expensive windows, is that the question?
Well, it's because it's a question from like 10 minutes ago. But yeah, so I think it's to respect code. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
if
mean,
if Windows become more expensive, then you have to go smaller, most likely, or
yeah,
less.
I don't think people will choose to have less windows because of cost, because they like their windows. They want to get as much daylight and as much as they can. But I think as we are designing our buildings to net zero levels, we might not be able to affordably put in, uh, in other words, to stay within the energy budget that the code's going to
Yeah.
give you, you might need less windows,
Mm.
or you might have to pay big bucks for the windows that are so high performance that you can actually maintain very large window to wall ratios.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So Terry's saying the requirement in City of Vancouver at 1.44U created a product shift from sliders to casement a few years ago. Now we see sliders that can meet the 1.44 target. Products will develop as targets get more challenging.
I think Terry's right. I think that we don't think of a sliding window as being capable of being really high performance, but I was surprised, from the Energy Star database, there were a number of 20, 30 manufacturers offering sliding windows. The lowest they could get the sliding windows to there was about one. And so I'm not saying all the sliding windows in that database can reach one, but 1.05 is the qualification path. So you're almost at one. So yes, I think as people put their minds to say, okay, I'm working with a vinyl frame, I'm working with this glass package, how can I modify that frame geometry to minimize the U value? You start thinking in those terms, and you'll see that relatively small modifications to the framing system will allow you to get extra drops in your U value that you would have thought you could only get from glass. And I think this is really as people start taking a close look at the design of their product, not just by how it looks or by copying somebody else's design, but by saying, what can I do to make this as most efficient as possible? You're going to see opportunities to make a product that doesn't cost any more to produce. The material costs won't be any higher, but you will have a significantly lower U factor. So I think intelligent design really is the focus. And I think if you work with your extruders, some of them already have very efficient designs. But if you make your goals and your needs clear, they can help you to design a product that is very efficient indeed.
Okay, I have a question from Patrick. Major renovations already need a building permit and would presumably fall under any change to building code. Doesn't renovation code imply expanding need for permit inspection to smaller changes?
So I think Patrick's talking about a renovation to your house as opposed to just window replacement. So window replacement generally does not require a permit and is not supervised. But it's true that if you are going to, let's say, build an addition onto your house, add a second story, yes, there are renovations that trigger the building code, and once they trigger the building code, then clearly the products usually then have to comply with the existing whatever code is in effect at that time. So.
Okay, so we have someone saying there are approximately 420 window manufacturers registered with NRCan. I believe Al is showing the number of windows that are below U 1.05. Some manufacturers possibly have multiple products or glazing combination that beat 1.05, but the number of 500 plus manufacturers with a picture window cannot be accurate.
That's a good question. I filtered the list for unique names in the brand column. And for companies, I won't name any companies, but there are some companies that have under a main company heading, there are sub-companies, right? So a brand that you think of with one name might actually be 7 companies in the database. So I actually eliminated those, I used the data filtering program so that the brand column was filtered each category was different. So I was also surprised to see 527 manufacturers for fixed windows, and I can't explain that. So basically, either my data filtering program lumped some things together, or there might be, like I say, I can't explain it.
Okay.
It's just that I did use a data filtering program to make sure that brand column was filtered down. And then I reviewed it again, just looking for duplicates and triplicates and quadruplicates visually, and eliminated clusters of companies that had multiple listings.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a pretty well filtered list, but I'm just working with the data I had. So
yeah. Okay, so Dave Goldsmith saying different ratings for different operator types are an artifact of the NFRC system. They may be equal in reality.
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, I'll
if David wants to come on and explain that'd be great.
Sure, thanks. Well, people have noticed that you tend to get pushed away from sliders into products like casement and the direct set. But in my experience, you're filling a certain opening size, and you've got a 2-light window that's a slider with 1 sliding panel and 1 fixed panel, and the competitor is a casement and a direct set. The NFRC system models the intermediate member on the slider, and it's steel reinforcing in its thermal conductivity, but it does not model the T-bar or mullion, which again may have steel reinforcement on the casement direct set. So it's basically puts a disadvantage to sliders, and it's kind of an unfair disadvantage. Whereas in the future, if we were to model them, the actual configuration and size, we might find that it was even Stevens, and that different operator types with the same glazing were really getting the same results.
Very good point, Dave. You're absolutely right. I think it's unfortunate that NFRC has done what they've done. They probably did that for simplifying reasons, but you're right. It has the effect of making sliding products look worse than they might be if they were compared on a real apples to apple basis that included the mullion joint, whether it's 2 products mulled together or an integral mullion. And I don't know what the solution to that is. It's I don't know there is a solution. There might be a way though of putting together some kind of a fact sheet or tool to help come up with resources for energy modelers to make intelligent choices about windows, and realistically to find some way to capture that, deal with that problem. And I wouldn't mind sort of offline bouncing some ideas with you on how that might be done. And then it's something that if we could come up with something that looks intelligent and workable, we could propose it to the technical committee or something. But I think it would be good to find a way to get around that problem for what I would call the specifying authority. Under these tiered codes, the energy advisors who work with HOT 2000 are going to be the people who choose windows. And I think we need to provide them with guidance on how to choose those windows, and to put parameters around solar heat gain, and to find ways of helping them appreciate that different operator types have different U values. And if they're going to try and use a single U value everywhere, then they need some guidance on how to approach that whole thing. And if we could do that, I think we'd be providing our industry a service. So if you're willing to throw some ideas on that, if others are interested and would like to participate in that, maybe get in touch with me and or Dave, and we might be able to see if we can make some headway there.
Good. Okay, thanks, Dave. So we have like 6 questions still. We are a little bit over our time now. Maybe we can give it another couple minutes, maybe 10 minutes tops. So we'll try to go through the 6 questions and let's see if we can make it. So
Okay.
John is saying introducing a simpler labeling program would help consumers understand the difference between a top performing window and a lesser performing window. Appliances use an Energy Star ABCD labeling program, A being the best performer. It allows consumer to compare like with like product. So it's more of a
So we used to have that when we had 4 zones in Energy Star.
Hmm.
And then I think we went down to 3 zones, and now there is just 1 zone across the country. I mean, it's a good point. If you are, I guess if there are different levels of performance that are being incentivized, then that would be helpful. If there is a single level of performance that's incentivized, then there wouldn't be any need for it. So I think that's an interesting discussion to have that might come up once, you know, if they do decide to regulate at some point, and if they regulate at multiple performance levels, then that would make sense.
okay.
But if they regulate at a level that's just pass fail, then there wouldn't be any need for that. So, and at this point, we just don't know what they would do there.
Okay. Well, there's someone just making a comment here, just saying sounds like the market will be pushed to be vinyl, and Laura seems to believe that also.
Well, let's put it this way: vinyl is, you know, the most cost-effective window framing material, and it's as energy efficient as fiberglass. There's really no meaningful difference between the two. And so it's easier to achieve those levels cost effectively with vinyl. But there are products in the most efficient category database that are made from wood, which I can tell from the product description where people are talking about clad wood products, for example. And they're out there performing as well as anything else in the database. So, and I'm sure there are fiberglass products in that mix. There might even be aluminum products in the mix. I don't know. You know, the aluminum product, some products are by their nature, their material cost is higher or their labor cost is higher. And so if you have a higher input cost, then in the marketplace, you generally have to then sell your product as a premium product. You have to give it some other characteristics that make it more desirable. But the reality is that the most cost-effective product will be vinyl, and other frame materials are going to be bought and sold because people don't want vinyl, because some people want wood, some people want metal. They want something that has a better perceived fit and finish, a better perceived quality. And so there's room for all products on the market. But you know, the question is, you know, will it be an all vinyl market? I don't think so, because there's already non-vinyl products in that most efficient category. It's just that they will probably not be able to compete on price. They might have to compete on other value.
Yeah, and we have Brad here saying a fair point. Like, there are appreciable physical performance differences between PVC and composites. He says he recommends that we don't even go there for this discussion, probably because you know.
Right.
Okay, so we have someone asking, I've heard window manufacturers have an option to self-label their windows as opposed to having the window NAFs tested at a lab. Could you clarify?
Well, you cannot label your product without testing. However, I have recently heard of a practice, and I won't say where it is occurring, but I have heard that apparently some companies have represented that use of their components in a product makes it a NAFS qualified product. And by using those components, manufacturers can self-label that their products are NAFS qualified, not having tested anything. And I was quite surprised to hear of this about a week ago. You know, I haven't had the opportunity to look into it, but that, I don't know if that's what the questioner has in mind. But that would involve some serious misrepresentation of what the standard requires, of what the code requires, and would be something of concern. So it's about all I can say on that question.
Okay. Okay, so and we have Jesse for the last question. Also, there are differences in the standard test slash simulation sizes, and that greatly affects the glass to frame proportion.
This is true, right? Yes, if you're simulating a product at a larger size, it's going to get a better U value. And this again comes to the question of the energy modelers. You know, they're simulating windows at actual sizes. The HOT 2000 program allows you to put in CSA or NFRC U values, and it can scale those values. If you know the frame height, it kind of hacks that value and provides you an area weighted analysis. But then the energy advisor is just taking all their window areas and saying, I need a U value of this and a solar heat gain of that. And again, I think there's a disconnect here between what energy advisors are asking for and not appreciating about windows that we need to address in some way. But it's true that obviously the size of the product and the glass to frame ratio will have everything to do with its energy performance metrics.
Okay.
And this actually is the advantage of the European system. The advantage of the European system of reporting a frame U value, a center of glass value, and then they have their psi values or their edge values. That makes a lot more sense than a whole product rating. The NFRC CSA system was designed, what's better, Coke or Pepsi, right? Is my product, how does it compare with my competitor? You don't need that number when you're designing a building to reach a certain performance level at the real sizes of the building. What you really need is a frame U value and a glass U value that you can scale in the system. And that's the approach they use in Passive House. The only inputs you put in are frame U values, glass U values, and things like that. And then the software just calculates the energy accordingly. And unfortunately, you know, we have to kind of work around the system we have, which is not really optimally designed for energy modeling of buildings.
So I'll just do real quick. So we have a question I can answer here. Cindy's asking, will a copy of this be available on the website? So for everyone to know, everyone who signed up to the spring conference, yes, you'll have access to a copy you'll be able to rewatch everything. You'll get links after the conference. So there's that. And for those who are on this call right now and it's for the first time to see Tech Talks, just know that we do that. We used to do that once a week. It's going to be a little less during the summer, but we're coming up with a concept. But just know that, you know, like this is not something we do once a year or twice a year. We do that on a really regular basis. So I invite you to attend and ask your questions. I'll try. We have 3 more questions here or comments. I'll try to go through them really quick. So Amber saying, COV, so energy modeling guideline state to determine project specific size and model that size, or model every size on the project, which would be way too time consuming. But the energy modeling guideline does not clearly identify how to determine the average size. If everyone in the industry determines the average size a bit differently, then it's not an apple to apple comparison across the board. I don't know if that...
well, that's true. That's just it. And that's why we don't use average sizes to compare products. We use the NFRC CSA sizes to compare products. So then you're always comparing apples to apples on every product.
Okay.
When it comes to energy performance in a building model, you need to break out the glass and the frame value. And HOT 2000 can do that if they also know the frame height of the product. It's kind of an approximation, but that's what they do. And okay. But her point is correct.
So last question we're gonna take for today, and we're gonna have like 42 questions answered on this one. So I think that's pretty good. And I'm sorry, Amber. Well, okay. So we have 2 more if we can do it. So there's one more here. James asking, have we reached a point or U-value requirements outweigh structural performance?
I'm not sure what that question means, that it outweighs structural performance. You need both, right? You need a U value for energy performance, and your product also needs to have structural performance. You need to qualify both under the code, also air and water performance. So they're both important. Is the question, is now the choice mainly about energy instead of structural?
Yeah.
And the question would be yes, because we assume that everybody has products that are qualified for structural.
Okay.
The structural values aren't changing. They are related to the environment and to the NAF standard. So, you know, your structural values haven't changed over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And they won't change for the next 5 years in the future unless we have new environmental data related to climate change. So energy is the main driver right now, because everyone assumes NAFS is taken care of. So
okay, so we have just a follow-up question from Amber. Who is to determine that average size we were talking about, as currently we are being asked to do so as the window manufacturer?
you know, that might be a question better taken offline, because I'm not sure what she means about average size. Maybe the energy modeler is saying, just give me an average number I can use in every hole. And that would, and again, that would just underscore the need for us to provide energy modelers with some kind of guidance
Well,
on this issue. So
you know what? So I'll take the occasion to mention, you know, like you're a member probably with Fenestration Canada, and you know, use that resource. We have Al with us. I'm here. Use those resources. Write us emails. You have questions, even
yeah,
if
definitely.
yeah. If it's
Feel
specific.
free to contact me, Amber, with the nature of your question. It might be very relevant to conversations we would like to have with energy advisors. So
Yeah, and also for anyone else on the line, when you have specific issues, you know, just send us an email, give us a call, and we'll see what we can do to help. That's where we are here to. That's what we're here for. So please take advantage of that. And I think that will have to be it for this week. I want to thank our sponsors. First of all, our main sponsor for Tech Talks throughout the year, which is Juanex Building Products, and who's also a gold sponsor for the Spring Conference this year, the virtual Spring Conference. And we also have Screenco Manufacturing as a gold sponsor. And you can see all the other sponsors behind me right now. So for those who want to attend it, who signed up for it, there's a technical committee, technical services committee coming up. So we'll see you there. And if not, we'll see you tomorrow. And I think it starts with the lean manufacturing seminar, which is really interesting. So I invite you to attend this one. Thanks again, Al, and
thanks, everyone.
see you later.
See you later on Tech Talks.